The kitchen was the heart of my home, a place I once thought was sacred, where life happened in a way that felt real. It had been my sanctuary, my place of peace amidst the chaos. For years, the clatter of dishes, the soft hum of the refrigerator, the smell of cooking dinner had been my constant companions. I had always been the one to cook, an act of care, of love, of routine. My partner, Derek, used to join me at times, chopping vegetables, stirring sauces, or simply talking while I worked. There was a rhythm to it. But lately, the rhythm had faltered. I had noticed the change slowly. At first, it was little things. The way Derek would come home late, his scent different, his mood distant. I told myself it was work, stress, the usual. I wanted to believe it because what the alternative might mean was too terrifying. I had become accustomed to the silence that had crept into our relationship. The long, empty evenings where he would sit on the couch, scrolling through his phone, while I prepared dinner in a quiet, solitary state. There was nothing malicious in it at first, just the dull ache of something slipping between us. The passion we once shared had withered, and we both seemed content to let it go unnoticed. But then there were the whispers, the feeling that something wasn't right, a knot that began to tighten in my stomach every time I looked at Derek. I couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed, something I wasn't privy to. The kitchen, which had always been a place of connection, began to feel like a place of loneliness. Cooking for one felt like a betrayal in itself. I'd find myself stirring a pot of soup, the steam rising into the air, wondering how things had gotten so distant, how something so simple could turn so complicated. One day, I overheard a conversation Derek had on the phone while I was in the kitchen, the voice at the other end muffled but urgent. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but I couldn't ignore the way he was speaking, softly, nervously, almost too carefully. My heart pounded as I moved toward the hallway to hear better, but just before I could catch a word, Derek ended the call and walked into the kitchen as if nothing had happened. "Hey, babe. You all right?" he asked, his voice a little too casual. I forced a smile, masking the rising tension in my chest. "Yeah, just thinking about dinner," I replied. I didn't push. I didn't ask what the call was about. I didn't want to know, but in the pit of my stomach, I already did. Something was happening, something I wasn't ready to face. Over the next few weeks, the unease only grew. Derek's late nights became more frequent, and when he was home, he was often distracted. I noticed little things. His phone always on silent, the occasional unexplained text message, his attention drifting in ways it hadn't before. I kept telling myself that I was being paranoid, that I was just imagining things, but deep down, I knew the truth. It was there, in every hollow glance and every unspoken word. Something had shifted between us, and I was losing him, piece by piece, without even realizing how it had started. One evening, after a particularly cold dinner, I found myself standing in front of the stove, stirring a pot of pasta with a wooden spoon. The sound of the sauce simmering was soothing, almost hypnotic. I had always loved cooking, loved the rhythm of it, the way it gave me a sense of control, of purpose. But now, even cooking felt like a betrayal. I had never wanted to question him, but I couldn't stop myself anymore. The tension had built up for too long, and I needed answers. I needed to know what was really going on. It was then that I saw it, an email on Derek's laptop. The subject line caught my eye. It was addressed to someone named Hannah, a name I hadn't heard before. My heart skipped a beat. I told myself not to look, that it was none of my business, but the curiosity gnawed at me, unbearable. I couldn't resist. I opened the laptop, the screen glowing softly in the dim light of the kitchen. The email was short, casual, but the words felt like a slap to the face. "I can't wait to see you again. I've been thinking about you all day." That was all it took. The breath left my body, and the world felt like it shifted on its axis. I felt lightheaded, like I might collapse right there on the kitchen floor. I closed the laptop, my hands shaking, my heart racing. The kitchen felt suffocating now, a place that had once brought me comfort, now felt like a prison. I wanted to scream, to cry, to throw something, but I did none of those things. I stood there, numb, my mind swirling with disbelief. I had known, deep down, that something wasn't right. But seeing the evidence in front of me, seeing the confirmation of my worst fear, was a different kind of hurt. My stomach twisted, and I felt sick. Every moment of our relationship, every intimate moment we had shared, seemed like a lie now. The dinners we had made together, the late-night talks, the moments when we held hands and laughed, it all felt so empty. Was it all just a performance? Was it all just for show? But what could I do? Confront him? Demand an explanation? I was terrified. I didn't want to lose him. Not like this, not over something so cruel. I stood there for a long time, my thoughts racing, my emotions in turmoil. The kitchen had once been a place of love, of care, of togetherness. Now it felt like a place where the last remnants of my trust were being torn away, bit by bit, piece by piece. The world felt strange, unreal. I wanted to confront him, to scream, to demand answers, but I didn't know if I could bear the truth. Instead, I quietly began to clean up the mess in the kitchen, pushing my emotions down, trying to ignore the ache in my chest. But no matter how much I scrubbed, I couldn't clean the mess that had been made in my heart. The kitchen was still my space, but it no longer felt like home. I had to confront Derek. I had to face what had been lurking between us for so long. But I wasn't sure I was ready. How could I be? I wasn't sure what I was even looking for anymore. What could he say to make this right? What could he say to undo the damage that had been done? The kitchen that had once been a symbol of warmth and safety had become the backdrop for a truth I wasn't prepared to accept. I just wasn't ready to let go. The discovery hit me like a freight train, an overwhelming flood of emotions I wasn't prepared for. I felt numb at first, like the ground had been pulled out from under me. I sat there for what felt like hours, staring at the laptop screen with the email still open. The words blurred as my mind raced. It was real. He was having an affair. There was no denying it anymore. Everything I had suspected, feared, was right in front of me. I had never felt so helpless, so small. I wanted to scream, to cry, to throw something, but I didn't move. I just sat there, frozen. The quiet hum of the kitchen appliances became deafening, a constant reminder of the silence that had invaded my life. I had always thought of the kitchen as a safe place, a place where we had built memories, cooked together, and shared small, intimate moments. Now it felt like a war zone. The walls seemed to close in on me, and I felt suffocated by the weight of the truth. For a long time, I couldn't bring myself to confront Derek. How could I? What could I possibly say? The words felt foreign in my mouth. The part of me that still loved him, still clung to the hope that maybe it was a misunderstanding, a mistake, couldn't bring itself to shatter the image of the man I thought I knew. But the evidence was undeniable. I knew that confronting him was inevitable. There was no running from this. When he walked through the door that evening, his usual casual greeting felt like a punch in the gut. I could barely look at him, my heart pounding in my chest. He noticed the tension immediately, his brows furrowing as he dropped his keys onto the counter. "Hey, what's going on? You seem off," he said, but there was no genuine concern in his voice, just the usual nonchalance that made everything feel so wrong. I had to bite my tongue to keep from saying anything. I had already rehearsed this moment 100 times in my head, but the reality of it was too overwhelming. Every fiber of my being wanted to scream at him, demand answers, but instead, I stood there, feeling more alone than I ever had in my life. He walked toward the kitchen, as if nothing was wrong. He glanced at the pot of food I had been preparing, and for a moment, I almost convinced myself that everything could go back to normal. But I knew it couldn't. Not anymore. "Derek," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "We need to talk." He stopped his tracks, sensing the change in my tone. He turned slowly, meeting my eyes with a look of confusion, but there was something guarded about him, like he knew something was coming but wasn't ready to face it. The silence between us stretched, and I could feel the weight of it pulling me down. I found the email," I said, each word feeling like it weighed 1,000 pounds. His face faltered for a split second, and in that moment I saw it. The guilt, the fear. It was all there, right in front of me. But instead of apologizing, instead of offering any comfort, he did what I dreaded the most. He tried to deny it. "What email?" he asked, his voice too calm, too practiced. I could see the wheels turning in his head, but it was too late. The mask had already slipped. The truth was already out. "You know what email I'm talking about," I replied, my voice gaining strength despite the storm of emotions crashing inside me. "I saw the one to Hannah. I know what's been going on." His silence was deafening, and for a moment, I thought he might tell me the truth, but instead, he shifted, looking away. He rubbed the back of his neck, avoiding my gaze. I felt my stomach drop, the emptiness swallowing me whole. "Look, it's not what you think," he said, but his words were weak, hollow. I could see the effort it took to come up with something, anything to justify his actions. But there was no excuse, no explanation that could make me feel better. "It's not what I think," I repeated, the anger rising in my chest. "You've been lying to me. You've been seeing someone else. How can you stand there and tell me it's not what I think? I never meant for it to happen." "It just did," he stammered, his eyes darting around the room, unable to meet mine. I was shaking now, my fists clenched by my sides, holding back the tears that threatened to spill over. "You didn't mean for it to happen?" I laughed bitterly, the sound sharp and bitter in the silence of the kitchen. "That's your excuse? You didn't mean for it to happen?" "I'm sorry," he muttered, but the apology felt empty. It wasn't enough. It would never be enough. "Sorry doesn't fix this," I snapped. "Sorry doesn't erase the lies, the time you've spent with her behind my back. Sorry doesn't make up for the fact that you've betrayed me." His face contorted with frustration, as if he was trying to find a way to fix things, but there was no fixing this. No coming back from what had happened. I had trusted him, loved him, and now all of that felt like a joke. A cruel joke that I had been too blind to see. "I didn't want to hurt you," he said, his voice barely audible. "I didn't want any of this to happen." I felt a wave of disbelief wash over me. "You didn't want to hurt me? Then why did you do it? Why did you let it get this far?" He didn't answer. He couldn't. The truth was staring both of us in the face, and there was no denying it anymore. My heart felt like it was being ripped out of my chest, piece by piece. Every word he spoke made the pain worse, made the betrayal deeper. I had trusted him, had given him everything, and now he was standing there, offering me nothing but excuses. I could feel the tears welling up, but I refused to let them fall. Not in front of him. Not like this. I had already lost so much, but I wasn't going to lose myself too. "I can't do this anymore," I said, my voice trembling. "I can't keep pretending everything's fine when I know what you've done." He looked at me, his eyes filled with a mix of guilt and regret, but it was too little, too late. I had made up my mind. The damage was done. "I don't know if we can fix this, Derek," I whispered, feeling the finality of my words settle in. "I don't know if I can ever trust you again." I turned away from him, feeling the weight of the moment sink into my bones. The kitchen, once a place of warmth, had become a place of pain, of lost trust. I didn't know where we would go from here, but I knew one thing. This was the end. I spent the next few days in a fog, moving through the motions of life without truly living. Every time I walked into the kitchen, I was reminded of what had happened. The once welcoming space felt cold, foreign, and haunted by the weight of betrayal. I found myself staring at the sink, the countertop, the stove. Each part of it felt like a mockery of everything I had believed in. Cooking, which had once been an act of love, had become an unbearable chore. The same ingredients, the same recipes, but now they tasted different, bitter. I couldn't escape the reality that had settled in my chest, heavy and unrelenting. I tried to keep myself busy, distracting myself with work, with errands, anything to avoid facing the pain. But it didn't matter. Everywhere I went, everything I did, brought me back to him, his absence, his lies. I couldn't shake the feeling that the man I had loved, the man I thought I knew, was someone else entirely. I was left with the hollow shell of a relationship that had once felt so real. My mind kept playing over the same questions, the same doubts. How long had it been going on? Was I really so blind? Had he ever truly loved me, or had I just been convenient? I found myself revisiting our past, trying to piece together the fragments of a relationship that no longer made sense. I thought about the early days when everything was fresh, when we laughed easily, when we would spend hours talking in the kitchen as I cooked, making plans for the future. I remember those nights, how we would dance around the room in our socks, carefree and full of hope. It was so easy to believe in those moments, to think that they were forever. But somewhere along the way, it all fell apart, and I had been too blind to see it. My thoughts always returned to that email, the one that had started it all. I can't wait to see you again. I've been thinking about you all day. Those words haunted me, replaying over and over in my mind. I tried to rationalize it, to tell myself it didn't mean what I thought it meant. Maybe it was just an innocent flirtation, a mistake. But deep down, I knew better. There was no mistake. There was no misunderstanding. Derek had chosen her. He had chosen to lie, to betray me. And I couldn't shake the image of him with her, the thought of him being intimate with someone else, of him sharing things with her that he should have been sharing with me. It felt like a knife twisting in my gut every time I allowed myself to think about it. I tried to talk to him, tried to make sense of it all, but each conversation only left me feeling more empty, more defeated. He apologized, of course, but his apologies felt like empty words. I'm sorry. It was a mistake. I didn't mean for this to happen. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to hear that he was truly sorry, that he regretted what he'd done. But I couldn't. The damage had been done. And no amount of sorries would ever undo the hurt he had caused. There was a part of me that still wanted to make it work, that still clung to the hope that we could fix things. But I knew, deep down, that I couldn't go back to the way things were. Trust had been shattered beyond repair, and without trust, there was nothing left. I tried to convince myself that I could forgive him, that I could look past the betrayal, but every time I thought about it, I felt a surge of anger, of pain. It was like trying to forgive someone who had taken something irreplaceable from you. How could I forgive him for stealing my peace of mind, for turning our home into a battleground? I spent a lot of time alone, sitting in the quiet of the kitchen, trying to make sense of my feelings. I found myself questioning everything we had built together. Was it all a lie? Had he been pretending the whole time? It was hard to accept the reality that someone I had trusted so completely could betray me so thoroughly. I had always thought we had something special, something real. But now, it felt like it was all just an illusion, a house of cards waiting to collapse. I began to feel angry at him, angry at myself. I was angry that I had been so naive, so trusting. I had let him into the deepest parts of my life, and now I was paying the price. I was angry that I had given him so much of myself, only for him to throw it all away. And I was angry at the world for making me question my worth, for making me feel like I wasn't enough. But as much as I hated him for what he had done, I also hated the way I felt about myself. I hated that I was still questioning my value, still wondering if I wasn't good enough, if I wasn't deserving of love. That was the cruelest part of all, that his actions had taken something from me that I couldn't get back. I couldn't get back the woman I was before this happened, the woman who had been confident, secure in her love, secure in herself. Now I was left questioning everything. Who was I without him? What did I want? Where did I go from here? The more I thought about it, the more I realized that I needed to make a choice. I couldn't keep living in this limbo, stuck in the past, clinging to a relationship that had already died. I had to choose to move forward. I had to choose myself, even if it meant walking away from the life I had built with him. But it wasn't easy. Every time I thought about leaving, every time I considered letting go, I felt an overwhelming sense of sadness. It wasn't just the loss of Derek, it was the loss of everything I had thought we had together. It was the loss of my trust, my belief in love. The idea of walking away from everything was terrifying, but staying felt like a slow death. I couldn't keep living like this. I couldn't keep pretending that things were okay when they weren't. In the end, I knew what I had to do. I had to stop blaming myself. I had to stop questioning whether I had done something wrong. This wasn't my fault. It was his choice, his actions, his betrayal. And while it hurt more than anything I had ever experienced, I knew that I would survive. I had to, because at the end of the day, I still had myself. And that was the only thing I could count on. The only thing I had left to hold on to. The weeks that followed felt like a slow unraveling, each day pulling apart the threads of what had once been a life I recognized. It wasn't just the emotional weight that was overwhelming, it was the sheer mental exhaustion. My thoughts were constantly in turmoil, torn between moments of clarity and periods of deep, unrelenting doubt. I had hoped time would heal things, that distance from Derek would help me regain my footing, but it didn't work like that. Time didn't erase the betrayal, it simply made it more bearable. The pain remained, a constant reminder that nothing would ever be the same. I had expected the anger to fade, but it didn't. If anything, it seemed to grow stronger the more I tried to suppress it. I was angry at Derek, of course, but I was also angry at myself. How had I allowed this to happen? How had I missed the signs? There was so much I felt I had ignored in the name of love. I had invested so much into that relationship, given so much of myself, and now it felt like I had nothing to show for it but emptiness. It wasn't just the loss of him, it was the loss of my sense of self, the identity I had built around us. That was the hardest part to swallow. That part of me was gone, and I wasn't sure how to get it back. I tried to occupy myself with distractions, things that could fill the space he had once occupied in my life. I threw myself into work, threw myself into anything that didn't require me to sit in silence with my thoughts. But nothing helped. The hours would pass, but the ache didn't subside. It followed me everywhere, reminding me of my vulnerability, my inability to escape from the reality of what had happened. There were moments when I would catch myself in the middle of something trivial, a simple task like making my coffee, and I would stop, feeling the weight of my own loneliness crushing me. One evening, I found myself sitting in front of the stove, absent-mindedly chopping vegetables. I had been cooking for a while, the rhythmic motions of slicing and dicing offering some semblance of peace, but it wasn't enough to silence the thoughts swirling in my head. I had always loved cooking, always found comfort in the kitchen. But now it felt like a cruel reminder of what had been taken from me. This space, which had once been a shared place of laughter and conversation, now felt cold, sterile, and distant. The memories clung to every corner, every surface, like ghosts that refused to leave. I could feel the anger bubbling up again as I chopped through the vegetables. Why had I let myself believe in something so fragile, something so easily destroyed? It was hard to look at what was once my home, my sanctuary, and see it through the lens of betrayal. The person I had built my life with, the person I had trusted with everything, was now the source of my pain. And worse, he seemed to be carrying on as though nothing had happened, moving forward as if I didn't exist. The thought of that, of him going on with his life, while I was left to pick up the pieces, only fueled the fire inside me. I had always prided myself on being independent, on being able to handle whatever life threw at me. But this was different. This wasn't something I could just fix on my own. I had tried to be strong, to keep moving forward, but the truth was, I wasn't sure where forward was anymore. I had no direction. I had no map. The world felt vast and empty, and every time I looked around, I felt more and more lost. I began to think about the future, about what I wanted my life to look like without Derek in it. I had spent so much time focusing on us, on what we had, that I had neglected to consider what I wanted for myself. I realized how much of myself I had given to him, to our relationship, and how little of me had been left at the end. It was a painful realization, but also a freeing one. For the first time in months, I allowed myself to think about my future without him, without that constant weight of betrayal hanging over me. I didn't know where to start. I didn't know what my future held. But one thing was clear: I couldn't keep living like this. I couldn't keep letting the anger, the sadness, the loneliness control me. I had to find a way to regain control, to take back the power I had given away. It wouldn't be easy. I knew that. But it was necessary. I began to make small changes, things that I could control. I rearranged the furniture in the living room, changed the way I did my daily routine. It was nothing monumental, but it was a step. I began to take better care of myself, not just physically, but emotionally. I started journaling again, writing down my thoughts and feelings in a way I hadn't done in years. It helped me process the whirlwind of emotions I had been burying for so long. Writing gave me a sense of clarity, a way to release the tension I had been holding on to. It wasn't a cure. It didn't make everything okay, but it was a start. Every day, I woke up and made the decision to keep going, to keep living. It was a choice, a commitment to myself. It wasn't about forgetting or erasing the past. It was about accepting it, embracing it as part of who I was now, and then moving forward. There were days when it felt impossible, when the weight of everything would press down on me, but there were also moments of peace. Small, fleeting moments when I could breathe, when I could smile without feeling guilty for it. Those moments were the ones I clung to. It became clear that healing wasn't about forgetting. It wasn't about trying to go back to who I was before. It was about growing into the person I was becoming. And for the first time, I allowed myself to feel hopeful about that future. It was no longer about Derek, about what we had or what we lost. It was about me, about reclaiming my own life, my own happiness. I stopped thinking about him, stopped looking for answers that would never come. The truth was that nothing could change what had happened. No amount of explanation, no apology, could make the hurt go away. I realized that I wasn't waiting for closure anymore. I wasn't waiting for some perfect ending. I was just living, moving forward one day at a time. I could never erase the pain, but I could learn to live with it. And in doing so, I learned that there was more to life than just surviving. I could thrive again. And that was all I needed to know.